주문 갓도슈 다이산주럭소쿠 니소겐렌 세리오の来保元ちなみに総最善に乗算するつて限定もってすだれをちす時にそあり同じ口ですだれをまく弦に湧く一徳一室 Entangling vines case 36 Two monks roll up bamboo shades. When the monks had gathered in the hall before the midday meal to hear Hogen Bunneki, the master pointed to the bamboo shades. At this, two monks went and rolled them up, both in the same manner. Hogen said, "One got it, one missed." And here we continue. After case 35 comes case 36. No choice. But again, somehow these cases always line up cosmically with what we are doing, with what we need to look at. Yesterday, we heard about Kanzan Eigen, this most important figure in this tradition of Rinzai-zen as it came from Japan. And today, we meet another master, this time from the ancient Chinese time, that is very important, and you will, during the Teishō, probably find out how that person relates to this very moment. And that overall is a great lesson that we can learn from studying the scriptures, from studying the words of those who no longer are with us. And it is true for the words that are attributed to the Buddha, to the ancestors, up to the words of Jōshū Roshi. And our job in this practice, besides, of course, engaging in the study of those words, which is very important, a very important aspect, a very important facet on this multifaceted jewel of reality. But the practice aspect that comes to it is where we have to make it relative in the sense of related to our own very situation, to this moment in our lives, to that what is real, this. So let's talk about this case, case 36, and let's meet Hogen Bunneki. First of all, the case, which is very short here, can also be found in the gateless gate. The gateless gate, the Mumonkan, has this case as case number 26. And as you probably know, and if not, I will just repeat myself. The Mumonkan has a main case, and then comes Mumon's comment, and a verse that Mumon offered. The Shumon Kattōshū, Entangling Vines collection, has no commentary. It is just the main cases. So that's why this is so short. So exactly the same words that we have here, the same characters in Chinese are found in the Mumonkan as the main case, the Honsoku of case number 26. So Hogen Buneki, he lived from 885 until 958. In this collection, the Shumon Kattōshū, we find Hogen in 6 cases out of 280 or so. He was a native of Yuhang in Zhejiang. His family name was Lu. He entered the temple at the age of 7 and spent his early years mastering the teachings of the Confucian classics and the Buddhist sutras. Very often when we hear about these masters, these teachers from that time, you will read and see that many of them started with studying the sutras and studying Confucianism. So it's always good to remember that Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and Confucius were contemporaries. Same time they appeared, one in India, one in China. And now here in China, when Zen came into this definition of its own tradition and school, of course, it meets the Chinese spirit of Confucianism that is as old as the teachings of the Buddha. It's very natural that somebody interested or born, let's say, born in that Chinese era would first begin with Confucianism and also the scriptures of Buddhism. The scriptures made it over earlier than Bodhidharma. Wonderful translators, transliterators were like mediators between the Indian culture and the Chinese culture. Kumarajiva, helping to translate sutras from Sanskrit into Chinese characters. It seems inconceivable how to do that. How well-rounded must these people have been? How deeply steeped and committed to such a gigantic, insurmountable task. And of course, even today, when we chant some of those sutras, chant basically what has been transliterated or translated at that time. Think of the Hanya Haramita Shingyo. It sounds so close to Prajnaparamita. Prajnaparamita, Hanya Haramita. In this case, the transliterators, translators, the mediators between the two cultures selected characters that somewhat mimic the sound of the original term. Prajnaparamita, Hanya Haramita. Or Anukutara Samyak Sambodhai, another one. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, the most supreme awakening. So many of these terms were just, the sound was translated into these Chinese characters. And then it came to Japan, where they are pronounced differently than they are pronounced in China. And nowadays, of course, we see it in Western, in Latin alphabet and chant it that way. It's a wonderful practice. I dare to say that the Chinese person, just by sounding out the characters as they are, if they had never been exposed to the teachings of Buddhism, would have no idea what it means. And there are so many interesting leaps of faith, we could say, that come from that. Remember the sixth ancestor, who was a very, very simple person, gathering wood, selling firewood as a teenager because he had to support his mother. It just sounds like a contemporary story. Children helping support mothers who are single mothers. And he didn't have time to go and study. If you know how he came to the monastery of the fifth ancestor, it is clear he could not read or write. He was illiterate. Yet, and here's the leap of faith, hearing in the marketplace at some point when he was selling his firewood, one line of the Diamond Sutra, he had this awakening. Very interesting. So the study of the sutras at that time in China was very common as a Buddhist practice. So Hogen started with his Confucian and Buddhist studies, and he devoted particular attention to one of those sutras. And that sutra was the Avatamsaka Sutra. The Avatamsaka, the flower or ornament sutra, it is translated at times. And eventually, he took precepts in a Zen, a Chan place, under a teacher by the name of Chōkei Eiryo. Many of these old masters studied this philosophy very, very deeply and learned how to follow the teachings of these various sutras. And the philosophy in Japan, or the Buddhist tradition that we find as a school in Japan that uses the Avatamsaka Sutra, is the Kegon school. So the Kegon Kyo. And it's a wonderful sutra that very, very clearly lays out the path of a bodhisattva. And it is informed by various parallel and preceding Buddhist philosophies, but it comes down to the teaching that even in a single atom, in a single speck of dust, everything is included. There's no difference. The one and the all are together. The all and the one. Truth and phenomenon are not two. And that was his philosophical background. But still, for some of us, when we study the sutras and begin with that, we still ask the questions. We still have questions and are unable to just believe it, what is written there, what we think about it, what we are told about it. And the same happened to most of these Zen ancestors in Tang China, who started out either as Vinaya students, students of the precepts and the Buddhist codex of rules, or as students of particularly scriptures such as the Avatamsaka Sutra or the Lotus Sutra. So after having taken full precepts under Choke Eryo, he went on pilgrimage. Many monks go on pilgrimage to see what is out there, to learn from as many masters as possible. And while on pilgrimage, a storm surprised the travelers, and he and his fellow monks took shelter in a monastery. And that monastery was led by a teacher by the name of Rakan Keichin. Rakan lived from 869 until 928. And as it is customary, when you stay over, you pay your respects to the abbot. And so these monks appeared and to pay their respects and to, maybe they had some tea. And so while they were sitting there in front of Rakan, Rakan asked, "So why are you on pilgrimage?" And Hogen Buneki answered, I don't know. I don't know, he said. And Keichin responded, not knowing is very close. So that's a very important point here. And please allow me to loop back to yesterday's Teishō, when we spoke about the question, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? Or what is the meaning of Jōshū Roshi stepping off the plane at LAX airport? Who am I? What is this about? These questions. And let's bring it together with this answer here. Hogen said, I don't know. And this I don't know answer we find in various places. Let's briefly visit the first case of the Blue Cliff record. Bodhidharma coming to China, meeting the Emperor Wu. What does the emperor ask? Who is this before me? What does Bodhidharma answer? I don't know. And in that case one, that not knowing of Bodhidharma is offset by the reaction of the emperor, who lets Bodhidharma move on, and later is told by one of his ministers when he asks, who was that? Oh, it was the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara himself. And the emperor says, oh, I didn't know. So not knowing and the flavors of not knowing are equally manifest in this exchange here. The I don't know of the not yet awakened Hogen, spurred on by the answer of his future teacher, Keichin. Not knowing is closest. Remember, these questions are very important. So I hope you have not taken from yesterday that these questions are not appropriate. Of course, they are what raises what we call the great doubt. These questions spur us on. It is the expression of that what pushes us forward on this path. It's our being curious, our investigation into this matter of life and death that brings up these questions. But as we heard, and as Malunkyaputta was told by the Buddha, these questions are not there to end up in declarative answers. The Buddha just ended with what he declared. That was the Four Noble Truths. But as to declared answers to why this, why that, no such thing is ever lasting. I don't know. Seems in the beginning like it is a lack of knowledge. And that's a quite Western approach. The first Rinzai Zen master who came to the United States was Shakusoen, who came in 1893 to speak at the Congress of the World's Religion in Chicago, which happened during the World Fair. And he came back and visited the United States in years after. And at one occasion, he was giving a talk about Buddhism to a group of theologians and philosophy scholars. I think it was somewhere in the San Francisco area. And after talking about Buddhism for some time, translated by his translator who came with him, who was D.T. Suzuki, he said, well, after so many years of the study of Buddhism, I have come to the realization that I don't know anything. At that moment, the listening scholars, you could see their faces droop. Disappointment. Some of them actually got up and left. Even the concept of not knowing, if we approach it from the point of view of lack, is very different than approaching it from not knowing and leaving all possibilities open. In this practice, we might arrive at a point where we realize, yeah, I don't have to know. And suddenly the burden of always feeling the lack of not being enough, of not knowing enough, of not having accumulated enough, of not having attended to all that seems to be lacking, falls off. So this is what happened with Hogen Buneki and his teacher, Kichin. Not knowing is closest. So after staying, of course, the storm went by. Storms only last that long. Another important teaching. So when Buneki was about to leave after this snowstorm, he and the abbot had the following exchange. Of course, the abbot learned in the meanwhile that Buneki was very, very well read and really dug into this Avatamsaka Sutra. So when saying goodbye out at the temple gate, the abbot said, "You say that the three realms are nothing but mind." That's Yogacara. And all dharmas, nothing but consciousness. Now tell me, and he pointed, Is that stone out there? There was a big boulder next to the gate. Is that stone out there, here in the courtyard, is that within your mind or outside your mind? Hogan replied immediately, within my mind. At this, the abbot said, oh, you wanderer, what makes it so necessary for you to travel with a stone on your mind? Telling him, you've been carrying around the stone. No wonder you have to run around and you're trying to get rid of it. In this case, it's not a kidney stone. It's worse, it's a stone in your mind, heavy, burdening down our steps. At that moment, of course, it became clear to Hogan that he had found his teacher. Hogan remained at Kichin's monastery, subjecting himself to the strict rejection of all conceptual interpretations. And this goes to show we grow up in a specific way. We study specific disciplines, and that equips us with a tool set of tools in our mind that we know how to use. And when we come and arrive at this practice, what will we use first? Of course, we will try to use the tools that we know, that we have been taught. And in Zen practice, these tools do not fit the task. So Kichin brushed off all intellectual or philosophical answers that Hogan would bring him. And he used to say, this is nowhere near the living truth of Buddha's teaching. Nowhere near the living truth of Buddha's teaching. Living is the central word here. And we don't easily give up on our thinking tools, on our conceptual tools. We are so clever. We are extremely clever. And we try to outfox these questions and come up with brilliant ideas and answers and present them. And Kichin just wiped it off the table. It leads to exhaustion. And one day, finally, fully exhausted, Hogan came to his teacher and said, I have no words to offer and no thoughts to raise. To which Kichin answered, when the truth of Buddha's teaching is to be presented, it is perfect and immediate unfolding. At that, Hogan awakened. This immediate unfolding. There's another koan to one of the one-word barriers of Umon Bunen, where he just answers Ro, which means it is obvious. Look. That is what helped Hogan awaken. So that brings out another term that we hear sometimes. It's the great faith. We heard about the great doubt. The great doubt is always asking, what is behind this? Not taking anything just unconditionally accepted, Don't accept anything unconditionally. You know, the old Zen joke goes that, well, my Zen teacher told me not to believe what anybody would say to me. And I did that right away. So already not listening to it and accepting something unconditionally, even that is to be questioned. Question, 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 question is digging, 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 digging. So this Daigidan, the great doubt. Now here we have to be careful that we don't mistake little doubt for the great doubt. This is not the doubt of doubting one's capabilities or any personal kind of doubt. It is that openness, it's that dot under the question mark that doesn't accept everything just without looking into it oneself. That's the difference between studying philosophy and religion and true contemplative studies. I see one person smiling on the screen. First-hand experience, not second-hand words that are just accepted intellectually. But the Daishinkon, the great faith, belongs to this as well. So what it is that this faith is? What is it? What do we have faith in? The great faith is like the functioning of gravity. Every day we stand on the face of this Mother Earth, our feet firmly on the ground. We don't doubt that. We don't doubt it. We get to know it over time, especially when we trip. We learn how that gravity works without will and desire. Jōshū often spoke about the activity of Dharma, Dharma no hataraki, that it is ishi yokyu nai, or ishi yokyu nashi. It has no will, it has no desire. It just functions like gravity functions. Gravity doesn't function because it wants to attract or to reject. It just works. And over time in life, we develop the trust in these natural activities. The great doubt originates and is based on that trust. Otherwise, we might just be utterly lost. So after succeeding to Keichin's Dharma, which means he became the successor to Keichin, Hogen served as the abbot of many different temples and produced 63 Dharma heirs. That's a very large number. Hogen used his great learning to emphasize not only transcendent awakening, but also its practical expression in the religious life. Here's another story. When a monk asked what the ancient Buddhas are, Hogen replied, "Right now, there's nothing to reject." Remember his teacher brushing his intellectual answers off by speaking about, this is nowhere near living Buddhism. So here's an answer. Right now, there's nothing to reject. Other words, we have to embrace everything. We have to be able to embrace everything. When asked about the mind of the ancient Buddhas, Hogen answered, "From the ancient Buddha's mind flows compassion and true equanimity." Hogen became the founder of a school that, of course, flourished for some time with his 63 successors. That's called the Hogen School. But after several generations, it was absorbed back into the Rinzai school. So this Chigan philosophy seems, when we hear the word philosophy, it might be a turnoff, but it's not necessarily so. So let's remember that Chigan philosophy basically states that, as Seppo said, in a single grain of rice, the whole world is enclosed. Everything is in one atom, one in all in one. Phenomenon and truth permeate each other. Let me tell you a little more about Hogen's teaching. Here's another very important and famous story. Once a monk asked Hogen, "What is the one drop of water from Sogen?" So Sogen is the place where Daikan Enozenji lived, the place where the sixth ancestor resided. It is basically the same question. What is the essence of Zen? What is the meaning of Bodhidharma coming from the West? What is the meaning of Jōshū Roshi stepping off the plane at LAX? Expressed here, what is the one drop of water from Sogen? Hogen answered, it is the one drop of water from Sogen. In Tahoma, you will find Sogen-ji, which is related to Sogen-ji in Japan. Harada Shodo Roshi founded One Drop Zen that has many temples by now around the world, in India, in Germany, and that is the one drop of Hogen. In one drop, the whole world is enclosed. One drop. Is Zen sometimes, since we talked about crime yesterday, about the thief taking away anything to hold on to. Sometimes Hogen's Zen is also described in a way that says, a night watchman commits a crime under the cover of darkness. Another wonderful saying, the person who is supposed to watch out that no crime is being committed goes and steals under the cover of that darkness. We talked about it yesterday. Rinzai deprives his students. Similarly, through his own upbringing, Hogen learned that holding on to any kind of intellectual application to questions like these great doubt questions, nothing is gained. So the approach of taking away anything to hold on to is also manifest in Hogen's teaching. So what about the two monks? Just before Saiza, before the midday meal, there's either Teishō or there's a period where the abbot allows the monks to ask questions and he or she answers. And this was the question and answer period that was coming up. And everybody sat down, and as they were sitting there, Hogen pointed at the shades. Bamboo shades. Reed shades, maybe. I'm sure some of us remember the rolling up of the reed shades at Mount Baldy Zen Center, or the letting down of them when the sun came up after Teishō. So something that seems to be very, very common, opening up. Now, of course, the images here describe more than just opening up the bamboo shades. Rolling up the shades is pointing to the process of awakening. Rolling up the shades. So he points, two monks get up and do exactly the same thing. Both succeed in rolling up the shades. The sunlight comes in through the windows and lights up that cavity of the room that had been dark before. And still, Hogen says, one got it, one missed it. One gains, one loses. What is Hogen telling us here? What helped him? Raising the great doubt, pushing us into this place where we will use the tools we have and use them until we come to the true experience and know for ourselves that these tools will not carry us and will not help us devise any declarative answer. Zen practice is not about a declarative answer. I've done that. I've been there. All those are just ideas, concepts, memories. There, somebody said to me in Doksan, reminded me of this wonderful saying that goes somewhat like, there's no more putrid smell, no worse smell than the smell of yesterday's awakening. And still, our mind likes to take that and put it in a bottle, and every morning, let's put it on and walk around and parade our awakening so everybody can smell it. It doesn't smell good. Hogen's teacher would have said, where is the living Buddhism here? Where is the life in this? What is the manifestation? So putting us in this predicament, putting out the bait for our discursive thinking, cutting our world into two, is what this koan does, if we take the bait. Many times, Jōshū Roshi's Sanzen reminded me of the great fisherman with his fishing rod, putting out the bait. And then I came in and I swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker. And then as a great Zen master, what did he do? He yanked on that, and the hook was in there, and the fish flaps around. And that is just exactly what teaches us that the tools we brought in, no, these tools do not work here. Hogen's bait is cutting the world into two. But at the same time, since we know a little bit about Hogen by now, we also know his expression is that saying one of the two, ittoku, ishitsu, one got it, one missed it. Missing is getting. Getting is missing. not in a dualistic sense, but they are the same. You can think about that and waste a lot of time. What we need to experience and to manifest is the truth of that as living Buddhism. There are so many koans that approach exactly the same aspect here. Let me just tell you about a couple. What about Mumonkan case 1? Jōshū's dog, Jōshū Osho, Chinamini Soto, Kushi ni kaete, Busho Ariyamata Innaya. A monk asked Jōshū, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? Have not. Busho Ariya, Mata Inaya. Have or have not. What about Nansen holding up the cat? Well, say a word or I will cut it into two. Cut it into two. You cut it into two, it dies. Life cut into a flat-faced place. Hei Menjo, Rōshi would say, is not the full life. Mumonkan 11 gives us a wonderful expression of the same question. Jōshū and the hermits. Jōshū going into the first hut of the hermit, and the hermit's answer to Jōshū's question is, he holds up his fist. Jōshū says, oh, the water is too shallow here to anchor the boat. He goes on to the next hermit. Exactly the same scene, same question. The hermit answers exactly the same way. Jōshū says something extremely complimentary. This one can give life or take life at will. What is that immediate Buddhism? In the Zen tradition, in the koans, we find many different manifestations. What did Gute Osho do? That was his answer. No matter what, this activity, which one is right? Which one is wrong? Where does it leave us? No declarative answers to be distributed here, to be held onto. Jōshū Rōshi, who we will commemorate in a ceremony in just an hour or so, always is asked us to manifest the truth of the principle that transcends this and that transcends have not, that embraces all of it, so that all is in the one, and one is in all. For us, the question is, how do we manifest it in our own lives? You don't have to be a Zen monk. You don't have to aspire to sit in a seat and give talks or see people in Doksan. That's not necessary. This is just one way of doing it. What we are called to is to find out for ourselves, how do we live that living truth of being a fully awake human being? We don't have to sit in a hut and raise our fist. We don't have to strut around and raise our finger. Let us examine our own conditions under which we arise. And let us develop that great doubt, not to take anything and accept it without questioning it. Let us arrive at that great not knowing based on this great faith. This is what we call the great effort, the third of the 3 pillars of Zen. The great effort to live through to the end, the great doubt and the great faith. I want to thank you all for having participated in this activity of peeking into our human nature, of peeking into what so many have no interest in. Becoming a fully rounded human being is a lifelong practice that can take many, many different shapes. Rinzai Zen is one of those shapes. Some of us who have the affinity to this particular type of shape of tradition, we can thrive in it. Let's do this all together. And each of us find the way, the practice that puts real, immediately unfolding of this wonderful activity of life and death at the center of our lives. As a mother, as a father, as a son, as a daughter, as a partner, as the stranger on the street who extends herself or himself or themselves to the needs of all. And even if we just help one, Hogen and the Chigan philosophy teaches us, one in all and all in one. Thank you. And ganbatte. Let's go on and walk the path of our lives fully.